okay, admit it. When you think digital marketing, funeral homes aren't exactly the first thing that comes to mind.
Right.
It's not your typical, social media campaign.
Right.
But we're all spending more and more time online these days. And even industries as, well, let's say traditional as this one, are finding ways to adapt. And that's what we're diving into today. The world of digital marketing for funeral homes.
Yeah, you might be surprised by just how much thought and strategy actually goes into reaching people in a space like this. It's a delicate balance to strike.
You're telling me. So to get into it, we got a whole stack of materials here from Director's Corner.
Okay.
They're a company that specializes in helping funeral homes navigate, well, this whole digital world we're talking about. Brochures, website blurbs. We've even got what looks like a sales pitch presentation in here. We're going deep on this one.
Yeah, and what I think is really interesting about this is, by looking at how Director's Corner positions its services, we start to get this, glimpse into the larger trends that are shaping how funeral homes are operating, today.
Okay.
And one thing that really jumps out from all of this material is the heavy emphasis on content marketing.
Content marketing for funeral homes.
Yeah.
You got to admit, that's not the most intuitive pairing. It's kind of like offering, I don't know, grief counseling at the grocery store checkout. You wouldn't expect it, right?
Precisely. But that's what I think is so fascinating here. It's how do they justify this approach?
Yeah.
And what they argue is that in an area that's so sensitive, traditional advertising can feel, well, too intrusive.
Right.
Too much like a sales pitch at a time when people are grieving, right?
Yeah.
Content marketing, on the other hand, allows them to build trust and establish themselves as a resource without being, so overtly promotional.
Okay, so I see the logic there, but what kind of content are we actually talking about here? Are we talking blog posts about the latest casket designs, eulogy writing tips? I mean, what's the angle?
It's actually much more nuanced than that. Director's Corner really emphasizes this importance of addressing the emotional and practical concerns that people have around death and dying, going beyond just the logistics of funeral arrangements.
So less about the products and more about the human experience.
Exactly.
Can you give me an example? What kind of content are they actually putting out there?
Absolutely. So one of the articles they highlight is actually titled Disenfranchised Grief, Mourning the Loss of Love Unfulfilled. It delves into these complex emotions surrounding losses that aren't always, socially recognized. Things like the loss of a pet or a miscarriage or even the end of a relationship.
Wow, that's pretty heavy stuff. I wouldn't have expected a funeral home to go there.
And that's precisely their point.
Okay.
By tackling these sensitive topics, they're positioning themselves as this source of comfort and guidance, not just a business.
Right.
Another article title that really caught my eye was Retirement Security, the full spectrum, including funeral pre-planning. It's all about framing, wouldn't you say?
It's definitely a softer approach than, hey, you're going to die someday. Come make arrangements with us now.
Right.
It's like they're saying, hey, you're planning for your financial future, so why not plan for this aspect of life as well? It kind of takes the awkwardness out of a conversation that, well, let's face it, most people would rather avoid.
Exactly. And they back it up with statistics. They actually cite that 74% of companies believe content marketing increases lead generation.
Wow.
So it's about planting seeds, right? It's about establishing a connection that could lead to future business down the line.
So even in a field as, well, seemingly traditional as, death care, the name of the game is still building relationships and trust.
Precisely. And they even acknowledge that. One of the materials actually quotes a funeral director who says that their content helps show that they're heavily involved in the community and that their, quote, biggest concern is caring for families.
Okay, so they're aware of the potential, let's say, perception problem that marketing death, even subtly, can feel a bit, I don't know, icky.
Right.
But they're trying to address that head on, they're highlighting their commitment to the community as a whole.
Exactly. And whether or not you find that convincing is kind of, a personal judgment call.
Sure.
But it's clear that Director's Corner is encouraging funeral homes to present themselves as more than just businesses. They're framing themselves as thought leaders, sources of comfort, and guides through a difficult and often confusing process.
It's interesting, isn't that? You don't usually picture funeral homes being on the cutting edge of marketing trends, but here they are, embracing content marketing, trying to be thought leaders. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It really speaks to this larger shift we're seeing across a lot of industries these days where providing value and building trust is becoming so important. People are just bombarded with like advertising messages constantly now, right?
Right.
So cutting through all the noise requires like a different approach, and maybe this is it.
Yeah, that makes sense. But it does make you wonder, like, where does the line get blurry? Because when it comes down to it, funeral homes are still businesses.
Right.
They're offering a service and need to make money to, keep the lights on.
Right. That's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it?
It really is.
Can you genuinely provide value and support while also, at the end of the day, promoting your services, especially in an area as, sensitive as death and dying? It's a tough one. It's a real balancing act.
Totally. On the one hand, you want to believe that funeral homes are driven by this desire to help people through a difficult time, which I'm sure a lot of them are, right?
Right.
But they also have to make a profit. It's a tough one.
Yeah, and that's where, transparency is so key. And Director's Corner actually touches on this in their materials. Like, they give an example of a funeral home that uses its website and social media to share information about grief support groups and resources, even if those resources have nothing to do with the services they offer.
So it's like they're saying, we're here to help even if you don't end up using our services. That's pretty interesting.
It is. It speaks to this idea that building trust and goodwill can go a long way, even in an industry that can be seen as like all about the bottom line, which unfortunately it kind of is in a way.
Right, exactly. But, it makes you wonder if this whole focus on content marketing and community engagement might actually be changing how people view funeral homes in general.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I mean, think about it this way. By positioning themselves as like resources and thought leaders, funeral homes could maybe start to reshape their public image a little bit.
Right.
Kind of move away from that stereotype of just being solely focused on profit during, such a sensitive and difficult time.
Right, exactly. It's a fascinating shift for sure. Now, speaking of shifting landscapes, there is another aspect of this whole digital marketing thing that we haven't even touched on yet. Digital death. Not exactly a lighthearted topic, but it's something that, more and more people are having to think about.
Absolutely. And it's unavoidable at this point. Our digital lives are becoming, well, they basically already are, completely intertwined with our physical lives. And that includes, what happens to our online presence after we die, which is kind of a weird thing to think about.
It is. We've got social media accounts, online banking, email, photos stored in the cloud. It's like we've got this whole other existence that's purely digital, and someone has to figure out what to do with it all when we're gone.
Exactly. And that's where, Director's Corner sees another opportunity for funeral homes to come in and provide, a valuable service.
So instead of just handling our physical remains, now they're going to be managing our digital afterlife as well. It's kind of a wild thought when you actually say it out loud.
It might sound far-fetched, but it's already happening. I mean, these materials we're looking at really highlight how important it is to help families navigate, all the complexities of online accounts and social media profiles and even things like, cryptocurrency holdings after a loved one passes away. They even have this whole section in one of their brochures about digital legacy consultations.
Digital legacy consultations.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So what does that even entail? Are they going to be advising people on what to put in their digital wills or something?
It seems like it. They talk about helping people develop a plan for all their digital assets, deciding what they want to have deleted, what they want to be memorialized, and who should have access to what.
Man, it makes you think. In a way, our digital footprint is becoming an extension of ourselves, like our physical selves. And we need to start thinking about how we want that to be, managed after we're gone.
Yeah, it's like planning your own digital wake or something.
Yeah.
Do you want your Facebook profile to stay active as a memorial page? Who gets access to all your emails? It's wild. These are questions that not too long ago we never would have imagined having to ask.
You're right. It's like this whole new set of etiquette rules is being written right in front of us, but for the digital age.
And funeral homes, it seems, are trying to be the etiquette experts on this whole new frontier.
It is a lot to wrap your head around. On the one hand, it makes sense. We're already used to planning for what happens to our stuff when we die, right? So why not our digital stuff too?
Exactly. And it's just like with physical possessions, there's that emotional attachment there, right? But there's also practical considerations and even financial implications to think about.
Totally. Like that old photo album in the attic. Your kids might want that for sentimental reasons. But your online banking logins, that's got real world consequences if that falls into the wrong hands,
For sure. And it's not just about protecting your loved ones from identity theft or fraud or whatever. It's also about kind of shaping how you're remembered.
Right.
But in the digital age. You know what I mean?
So it's almost like you're curating your own online legacy in a way.
Yeah, kind of. Do you want your social media profiles to be, like, memorialized, or would you rather just have them, like, totally deleted? What about all those emails you've sent and received? I mean, are those part of your life story? Or should they be treated more like, private correspondence?
It's true. It's like we're all creating these massive, like, digital archives of our lives without even realizing it, but we haven't really figured out, like, the rules for what happens to them after we're gone.
And that's where this whole conversation gets really, really interesting, because it's not just about the logistics and legalities of it all,
Right.
It's about dealing with some pretty, profound questions about identity and memory and what it even means to exist in this digital world,
Makes you wonder, right? Will future generations judge us by our online personas just as much as, the physical stuff we leave behind?
Right.
Like, will they scroll through our Instagram feeds the way we, I don't know, flip through old photo albums?
It's possible. It's totally possible. And it just brings up all sorts of ethical and, philosophical questions, like who actually owns our digital legacies? Mm-hmm. And to what extent should we be able to control how we're remembered online? Like, what happens when our digital selves don't match up with our offline selves?
So many questions. But I think that's the beauty of a deep dive like this, right? It's not about, finding all the answers. It's about sparking that curiosity and, maybe challenging some assumptions and, maybe even making you a little uncomfortable with stuff we usually just take for granted.
Exactly. And I think, based on the Director's Corner materials we've looked at today, even funeral homes are, evolving along with the rest of us, right? Trying to figure out how to navigate this whole new world.
It definitely seems like the funeral industry is changing, and not just because of the digital marketing stuff, but it's like they're repositioning themselves for a world that's just more comfortable talking about death and dying in general.
It's fascinating to see, and whether you find it, comforting or unsettling, one thing's for sure: death, just like life, is being totally reshaped by this digital age.
Well said. Well, that about wraps us up for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll catch you next time.